Klar? Yes. Welcome back from the break. I'm glad to see we still have everybody with us after this quantum talk, which was very, very good. Quite challenging to my mind. I'm really glad today to introduce Andrii. Andrii is a good friend of mine from Ukraine. And this talk is a beautiful example of the power of network. I've been doing a small talk for a group of Ukrainian refugees in Denmark about how we use network on the Danish job market to find a new job. Most jobs in Denmark are found through network. So I did this talk and I talked to Andrii and said, well, do you know anyone who could talk about something with cybersecurity? And Andrii said, well, I can do that. And this was last Saturday. So it was with very, very short notice. But Andrii really solved a problem for Lund&Bendsen. So I'm most grateful, Andrii, and I know you have a interesting and also tragic story to tell about the current situation, cyberwarfare-wise in Ukraine. I'm looking forward to hear about it, and once again, thank you for really enriching this today's agenda. So welcome, and you can introduce yourself with a little more words than I.
Yeah, okay, super. Thank you so much, Jakob. Okay, what about me and why I'm here? So I am a Ukrainian lawyer with 12 years experience, and in Ukraine I didn't think about change my career to cybersecurity or anything else because I'm a good lawyer and it's interesting for me. But because of full-scale invasion, I have moved to Denmark with my family. It was in May last year. So from that time I'm here, and I think how I can use my knowledge, my experience, and to do something good in this country. That's why I decided to change my career path to cybersecurity, because IT was interesting for me during all my life, and it was part of my life. That's why I have changed it, and now I am doing a little bit of IT support in Zealand and looking for how to improve my skills in cybersecurity and doing my first steps in it. This picture is where I used to work in Mykolaiv, Kherson, and Kyiv, because I was part of this big state broadcasting company. What you can see is Kherson, this one. So yes, it's Kherson broadcasting company. It's Kyiv, and it's Mykolaiv. Our building of regional authorities, which was bombed in March last year, and I spent a lot of time on 8th floor in the court, and it was terrible to know that it's destroyed. So about what I want to talk about, it's about few examples of cyber attacks which were happened before the full-scale invasion and during it. Also about migrations, critical public IT applications to the cloud, and about private bank migration also to AWS. So why Russian attacked Ukraine? During the first part of 2022, they focused on the media and telecommunication industries. It's because they want to do something with our possibility to fight, and they want that our authorities said, no, we will not fight for our country. And also they did a lot of different cyber attacks before it and after full-scale invasion. But during the second part of 2022, they changed their focus to the energy system and focus on spying and data theft. Also, this cyber attacks was combined with missiles attack on our energy system, and it was a big problem. All this blackout during autumn, winter, and it was a terrible situation. But now during summer it's a little bit better, and we have another problems. So this defense attack, it was happening in January 22. You can see the example of the message which we found on different government websites. It was about our sensitive data that it was saved, but it wasn't. It was only a picture and no other problems. But later, what happened? Attackers used some vulnerabilities in our October CMS, and they can use this request and reset password and use this admin privileges. So it was a well-known vulnerability. You can find some details about it, but still we had this problem, and this attack was successful. But later, in a few days, we found that it was not that it was only the first part of attack. The second one was about Viper, and it destroyed a lot of different sensitive data. And it was looked like ransomware, but it wasn't, because it showed ransomware nodes that you need to pay and you will receive your information back. But in general, it works just for destroying data and anything else. And about results, 22 websites were affected and 6 websites were lost. And this is information about how it works. It overwrites master boot record and then just encoded all data on the computer. It was specific extensions, and no one couldn't encode it back. So it was a big problem. Yeah, it's about 15th of February. We had big DDoS attack to our banking system, and it was for few hours. Some banks were, we couldn't use it for a few hours, some of them for a few days, and it was a big problem because a lot of our Ukrainian citizens use private bank, Optaget bank, and Dia portal. So you can imagine that it's a problem when you couldn't use your money, and all these volunteering projects, anything else, they need speed to buy something and get money, volunteering money. So it was a problem. And during the beginning of full-scale invasion on 24th of February, it was a big attack to the Viasat company, to their modems, and attackers gained access to these modems and destroy it. So it was a new Viper. Sentinel Labs found it and called them ICIT Rain. More details you can find on their website, but about results and what happens. For Ukraine, it was a big problem that we use this satellite network like a reserve channel, and also use it in government system and in our armed forces. So it was combined with full-scale invasion on 24th of February in the early morning, and our armed forces had big problems with connection with this and couldn't use it. So it was a big attempt to destroy it, and when you don't have this connection, you couldn't do something in a good way and couldn't connect with other parts of your country, and it's bad practice. So also, it's a good example that these cyber attacks, they were not only in Ukraine but also in Europe, because you can see about wind turbines, German energy companies that also had the problem with this equipment. So sometimes when Ukraine is a target, but also other countries could be involved in this process. So what happens? How it was? attackers gain access to VPN, and then they go through the operation center in Turin. And after that, they received a lot of information about these modems, about firmware update and how it works. So they just push all these new updates to modems and then destroy it. So I know that during these first days, Viasat changed these destroyed modems in Ukraine, and now it's much better. And also we start to use Starlink, and it's a very powerful thing for our armed forces because they could use it in different places, and it's real-time connection, much better. You can share all your information, all your data, video, and in real time you can see what happens in different places. So that's why it's very important, and I think it was the purpose of Russian attackers to destroy this connection. Yeah. Now I want to tell more about migration, about our critical services, IT services, and about regulation, because I'm a lawyer and I know how it was before full-scale invasion and after it. On February 17, we had a new law about this question, about all this public cloud infrastructure. It was very good, interesting, and we could use it, but in 6 months after we received it. So on 24th of February, it was good law, but it hasn't legal force. Yeah.
We have a similar law in Denmark, but that's because of we're a NATO country, so that we have restricted yderst hemmeligt and hemmeligt. So we have these laws saying that you're not allowed to store state secrets in any system. So we do have the same law in Denmark.
Yeah. It's we also had the same situation that our sensitive secret data we couldn't store it outside, but and that's why we had our own data centers in Ukraine, and it was a target of Russians' attack, because if they can destroy it, we lost a lot of data, and time to rebuild it, during this first day, it was a very bad idea. But as I say, we couldn't use this law during first days, during this full-scale invasion, and we need to do something. During this time, we have some regulations acts what were used, and what happens? The first one was our national bank. They decided that bank infrastructure is very important, and we need to do something with it. So they decided to allow Ukrainian banks to send all this information outside of Ukraine to the cloud, and don't look on this regulation about sensitive data, about state secrets, because you have two ways, lost it or push it to the cloud. So it's a very simple decision. We will do everything just because we want to save it and use it in later times. So that's why from this decision, our banks start to think how to do it and how to send it to the cloud. Yep.
I have a question connected to that problem exactly. I mean, traditionally or historically, we've seen a lot of situations where the attacker moves in, takes over the national databases and use that to eradicate the population. For instance, the Jews in Amsterdam was eradicated through the Jewish, their own registrations. So my question is, was there any consideration as to protect the data from getting copied by the Russians instead of just maintained, if you understand my problem?
Yeah, I understand. It was more about risks of destroying. It was not about copying, because it was, not very well, but it was a good system, and it was secure. But if if we have physical risks as a missile attack and we will lost it. So that's why we need to move it. It was not about copying and. Yeah. So our authorities decide that it's a very good idea to move it to the cloud and store it there. The next, it was our cabinet of ministries that decided that yes, you can store your data, sensitive data, in outside Ukraine and without any problems during this war period, and it will be okay. And the last decision, it was another law. And by this law, Verkhovna Rada changed a lot of different laws and just say that in everyone that said you can store your data outside, but also sensitive data, but you need to transfer it back up to 6 months after war will stop. So we have this deadline where we need to move it back, and from this period we can throw it back. But what I want to say, all these regulations, it's very good, but when you need to save it, you will not do by law and think about it. You will move your data, and then our public authorities will create these laws, and it will be okay. But first of all, you need to think about safety and about moving and so on. And also, very important things was about cybersecurity certifications that our laws, they said that, okay, you can use this Europe certification or US certification because it's totally safe and it's okay for us. And why we have this question? Because in our laws it said that you need to have a Ukrainian certificate and our specific certificates. And during this time, I think Microsoft, Amazon, they are not interested to take it, and it's bad idea to do something about cybersecurity with a connection with Ukraine and so on, so on. So it was just allowed to use this infrastructure, and it was totally okay. Why? Reasons, it's example, this destroyed building. There was also some data center about our original authorities, and yeah, they lost a lot of information, and that's why we need to transfer all this data to cloud and be sure that it will work without any connection to this physical risks. So, about numbers, how it was. It was near 10 petabytes of information, and half of them was from our private bank. A lot of ministers, universities, distance, remote schools, and other things. Also about critical infrastructure, it's about our registers, about all this information about property, about companies, about everything. Like example, I saw this Danish system. I couldn't pronounce it. It's yeah, it's hard for me, but we have the same system, and it's very important to move it to the cloud, because if, for example, by cyber attack or by physical access, some Russian soldiers or anyone else will gain this access to this data, they can just change the owners of a lot of buildings, and you will never know where is the truth, who is the owner of this building or this building, because it's only from 2013 we have this electronic system, and it's the first thing when you will see who is the owner. Not about physical documents, but about electronic systems. That's why it's very important to save it and be sure that no one can destroy it or change without permission. how it was, how we migrated all this data. By our authorities, it was decision to move it physically, because they didn't have enough of channels to transfer this data fast and safety, and also because of these problems with our connection services, and it was much more safety to do it by physical way. That's why we use Snowball H, and they arrived to Ukraine during first 3 days of full-scale invasion, and then just moved to Polish. I don't have a lot of information about how it was in the deep details, because it's because of security reasons, and they just say that, yeah, we use this technology, by transfer it to Amazon Web Services, but not more details. And about how it was during first months, they stopped all these registers, services, and we couldn't use it. I tried to use it because of my law job, but no, everything was stopped. It's because they couldn't maintain it during this moving process, and decide, okay, we will stop it, and it's not so important now because of first days, and it's okay. And I can understand that during this process, it's much more important just transfer data than maintain it as working services. It was not like bank systems that we need every day, every second, so it was okay. What I said about challenges about this big amount of data and physical problems with channels, we couldn't use it so in this good way, and that's why we use Snowball H and transfer it by this way. Also problems with complexity, this migration process, and all these things. When you can understand that authorities, it's not the best job what you can have, and not the best salaries. That's why really good professionals, they are not interested to be in this state services. That's why it was a big challenge for our professionals to do it. But of course we had a big help from Microsoft, from Amazon. They helped us to do it, and it was okay. Now everything is working, and it's okay. We have all accesses, we can use it, and it's not a problem. It works like it was before the full-scale invasion, so now it's good. And now I want to tell about Privatbank migration to the cloud. It was very big challenge because as I mentioned before, they had near 5 petabytes of information, and they need to maintain their processes online during all time, because a lot of volunteers use this bank for donation, for buying something for the army, and if you lost access to this money, it will be terrible. That's why they think how to do it and what happens. And it's a good example of how you can do it quickly. It was during 45 days, and from the beginning and to the end, and they moved everything, and it was only 60 hours downtime. I received these messages from my bank that we will be not available during 3 hours per night, and you couldn't use it. But it was during deep night from 3 o'clock, so no one wanted to use it during this time. That's why I think people didn't mention that we had this migration process, and it was totally okay for them. Also about reasons why. Because we need to maintain this access, this service for the client, and Privatbank want to save their business. And it's one of the biggest state banks, and yeah, very good example of critical infrastructure. And why they choose Amazon Web Services? It's because they have some experience with them. They have small not small, but small experience with it and good expertise inside. So they know what they need to do and how to do it. All these connections, and they didn't need to use a lot of time to establish this connection with AWS. That's why they decided, okay, we will move to AWS. About process, how it was. Because Privat Bank had their own specialists, they decided we will do it by ourselves because we don't have a lot of time and we couldn't use 2-3 weeks to analyze our system, how we can migrate and anything else. So they just chosen the most critical system and do it step by step. Also, about channels, they had direct channels to AWS and they could use it, could transfer this data, and it was okay. Of course, there were some limits, but Amazon quickly raised this limit, so it was okay. And as some people from Privat Bank said, that they maintain it was working on site and in public clouds simultaneously, and sometimes it was hard to connect them to each other, but they did it. So it was totally okay, and no one could say that it was broken or something like that, and it's a good example how it was. So about advices from Privat Bank, what they said that one of the most important things was were channels, direct channels to your cloud provider. It was a specific problem in Ukraine because we had all these attacks to the critical infrastructure and blackouts and all these physical risks, and a lot of channels were destroyed. So it's very important, especially for last mile. Sometimes you have 2-3 providers, but last mile is only one, and if it will be destroyed, that you will have a big problem. Also about migration process and optimization process. First of all, they did migration to the cloud, and after that they evaluate what they can optimize and how to do it. And in numbers, they reduced their costs from the beginning of migration to the end. It was 3 times. So, because they think, okay, we need much more than they expect to use a lot of money, but some services they reduce it, and that's why they can also save money. And I want to mention that this help from Microsoft and Amazon, it was very good, and we really appreciate it, because all this technical stuff, all this cloud services and cybersecurity help, it's very important during first day of full-scale invasion and now, and that's why it's very good that these companies understand that we need this help, and they could provide it free of charge, and a lot of our critical infrastructure now is working on these platforms, and we know that everything will be okay on technical side, and no missiles, no other physical problem can destroy it. So, questions?
Don't the banks have backup data centers? All the large banks I know in Denmark have at least 2 data centers that are less than 20 kilometers apart, so that you have separate connections and separate data centers.
Yes, sure, they have these backups, but problem is that all of them were in Ukraine. So by Russian reconnaissance, they know where they are located, and they can destroy everything. It's not, you know, you can hide one of them and it will be okay. No, it's a big risk to destroy everything. That's why, yeah, we need this migration, and we did it.
Any more questions? Yes, I actually have a question for all of you guys. Have any of you moved one server in a Danish enterprise within 45 days? Let me see your hands. No, I thought so. You had a question?
I forgot my question now. Secret data centers. Just make the data centers a state secret. That is one way to mitigate that other people know about them.
Yes, sure, but one more. When you have these war risks, and you can understand that attackers will have stage of reconnaissance, and they will know where it's located and how to destroy it in the best way. That's why, yeah, we had it, but it's not 100% security decision. They will find it.
I'm super curious. It's very seldom you hear of projects that are 3 times cheaper than estimated. So how did that happen?
Because they think about what we need to move, and just to have redundancy and have much more powerful decisions. But then after the migration to the cloud, they say, okay, we don't need so much resources for it, and we don't have this big. We didn't use so much resources. That's why we can reduce it and don't pay for them. Also, after optimization, they just change some programs, change some decisions, some servers, and it also become much more efficiently than it was before. And of course, when you have your own data center and you can build it physically, sometimes you don't do it in the most efficient way. But when you need to migrate it, and you need to decide how it will work, so yeah, it was a reason why they can reduce these costs.
Just one question. So you moved the server physically to Poland?
No, we used this Noble H. It's 80 terabytes of information, each of it, and but then now we're using this private server in Poland. So it was a physical transfer from Ukraine to Poland, and then in Poland transfer it to the cloud, and also in one private data center there.
Yeah, but my follow-on question is that my experience is that banks, they will often have some IBM mainframe stuff, and I don't know if they are available on Amazon just by this.
I don't know answer for this question so deeply, but yeah.
But I'm really amazed that you could do this in so few days.
You know, it's because when you have this kind of situation and these risks, you will think, okay, how I can do, not why I couldn't do it, but how I will do it, and you don't have other way, don't do it.
Yeah. In the same period, we have been willing to train Ukrainians in flying jets, but they have not made the papers yet. They use the same time for that. So I'm amazed.
It's also about some kind of bureaucracy, and Ukraine is big, and we have a lot of different people. They could work in different way, and you know how it works. Sometimes it depends of people, of their mindset. If they think, okay, I need to do it, and I will do it very quickly, so they will go through this legal requirements or something like that. But sometimes you have another kind of person, and they can do step by all these requirements, and it will take a lot of time.
Well, I also guess that having a missile pointing at your data center is also quite motivating for getting a move, right?
Of course, you are totally right. And you never know.
Just a comment about the mainframes in the banks. I'm not 100% sure if they had mainframes in the banks or not the what we used to have, because mainframes as we used were invented before the opening of the east to the west and so on. So probably when they caught up in after the opening of the Iron Curtain and so on, some of the technologies probably are not mainframe based or not so heavy loaded with the legacy that we have in our mainframes right now.
Yeah, it's also a good reason, because compare with Europe, we are pretty old. We have pretty old infrastructure systems, so we don't have this legacy, as you said, and that's why it's a little bit easier to move. For example, like internet connection in our cities, it wasn't so spread dial-up connection because during early 90s. It was not so popular internet in Ukraine, and it was only in few places, not so spread.
All right. Thank you so much for a very good and thorough insight into just a tiny bit of the problems you have to deal with when your country is being invaded by another country. And I also think it's really kind of ironic that we want to keep data within our country. It makes perfect sense right now in Denmark, but one day it might make perfect sense to move data out of, say, Denmark. And I think it shows something about IT security, that there's never one clear answer or clear truth to anything in this area. It's always like some attack and some countermeasure, and what is the right thing to do today? It's not the same as what is the right thing to do tomorrow. But thank you so much, Andrii, and I think we should give you a applause again.
Thank you for your attention.